Hello YouTube. I want to tell you about what my prior employer I should say now, UPS, United Parcel Service Incorporated, did when my dad died. Since I was such a hard, faithful worker, knowing there was really nothing I could do anyway, when I got the call that my dad had been struck and killed by an 18-wheeler, I went into work that evening like it was any other day, and I told my supervisor and my full-time boss when I got there that my father had been killed. As the night progressed, I was working, and I would pick up the floor packages that had fallen or were damaged with contents spilling out, and I would tape them up to try to make sure consumer goods were not lost. A regional supervisor in the Red River District, I worked at the Stafford, Texas hub. This guy walked by the supervisor, and he complained about the fact that there was still stuff on the floor that was not taped up. And I said, I'm getting it, hold on. I'm working on it right now. And my full-time supervisor walks up to him and says, hey, just give him a minute. His dad just died. He came into work anyway. The guy said, I don't give an F. If his dad just died, I don't care. I want this stuff, I'll say stuff, cleaned up. And I wasn't really surprised, but I want customers and I want other potential employees to know that there were a lot more expletives in there than what I mentioned. And this is the general consensus at UPS. They don't care about you or your family as employees or as customers. It goes so far beyond simply being callous as a company. There's a malicious, almost hateful ideology inside the UPS at some of the hubs. And they go out of their way to inflict suffering on your family when you're in a crisis or you've had a crisis. I got very sick 5 years after that death when my wife died in a second crisis that affected our family. And I had to go into the hospital for a few days because I was coughing. It was terrible. I contracted a serious illness and I didn't know what it was. And UPS didn't care then either. When they found out that I was in the hospital and that I wasn't going to be able to come back to work for a while, they canceled my insurance immediately, even though I had almost 9 years with the company. And not long after that, I received a termination letter. I'm a single parent. I have been now for 8 years. My children were much younger than they are now. They were at the point where they were very young when the company terminated me. They didn't care what happened to us. I ended up losing my insurance and I couldn't get access to medical treatment at all, and I remained sick for years with chronic serious illness. In the first 18 months, all of my investments and savings through the company's 401k program for both myself and my wife were wiped out. And within 5 years, my house had foreclosed and gone to auction. That's what UPS did to my family. They're evil. UPS is an evil company. They don't deserve your business. They don't deserve your employment. as a potential employee. They make it a point to be cruel when your family's experienced a serious crisis. They try to tell pregnant women that they can lift up to 150 pounds. And if you bring them a letter, as my wife did when she was an employee there before her death, stating that you have lifting restrictions, they will terminate your insurance and tell you that you can't work, and they'll send you home effective immediately and put you on an inactive list involuntarily, so that your pregnancy is uninsured, because they don't want to have to pay for labor and delivery or prenatal care for an employee that isn't actively working in the position of their preference, the corporation's preference. They tried to terminate my wife when she came in with that lifting restriction from her OBGYN. And the EEOC ended up getting involved on behalf of another employee, and it became an action class. And they had to send out small settlement checks to the families, but it took many, many years. We weren't the ones to file the claim, but by then my spouse was dead, and my employment with the company had ended. My experience with UPS was terrible. I was harassed endlessly while I was there. They're absolutely vicious towards their employees. No amount of production can satisfy them. They complain without end. They are rude. They engage in illegal terminations and highly unprofessional behavior in the warehouse workplaces. I was called by racial reference names rather than my actual name at times. I'd have other people walk up to me and call me white boy instead of simply calling me by my name. And we had to buy all of our own equipment: gloves, boots, shirts, shorts, coolers, drinks, snacks. And oftentimes they would skip break time altogether. We wouldn't even get breaks. I can't even begin to tell you the kind of hell that I went through while I was working there as an employee, both personally and professionally. And the company was not supportive through any of it. It was horrible. The company was horrible. The part-time and full-time supervisors, in many cases, were deeply unprofessional, to the point that I actually had to complain about a hostile workplace environment, because there was, in one case, there was an employee, a part-time supervisor, who was going around and he was just cussing at everybody. I mean, just constantly. The worst obscenities, the worst insults, and they ended up having to transfer him to another hub. But only after I protested on behalf of dozens of other employees that this individual had dealt with. I said, look, y'all got to do something about this. I never complain, about language and workplace behavior. I hardly ever said anything to anybody. Only twice in my 9 years there did I complain about language. And there was a lot of unprofessional behavior that I saw, but two individuals were especially offensive, and it was just endless. I was having to file grievances to the local union over harassment and warning letters constantly. I was dealing with being a domestic violence victim at home, and surviving sexual assault. That's a complicated story. And trying to get through college, going to school full time, and experiencing a really, really bad abusive marriage. Trying to put my spouse through college. My spouse ended up committing suicide on my birthday. It's just a disaster. I ended up losing my 401k and all of my investments in just 18 months. After 9 years with the company, I lost all of it. And the company wasn't supportive at all. You know, the union was like, let's throw a benefit for this person. It was Teamsters Local 988. And they never got around to doing that. And I held on for a long time. I ended up moving out of the house that foreclosed right before the pandemic hit. Literally just 3 months before the pandemic hit, I moved out of my house. I just gave up. Couldn't do it anymore. The house got burglarized, and for somebody to invest so much time, almost 10 years with the company, and to have this kind of experience, you know, that's time I can't get back. I feel like I wasted my life working there. UPS is a horrible employer.